Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Council meeting on June 27th, 2023. We are now live on YouTube and it's really exciting because I have a gallery full of people here and it's been so long, as well as lots of staff in the room. So this is nice for a change. I'm going to start with a roll call. I'm Mayor Johnson present and chairing this meeting. Councillor Bryant. Present. Councillor Burgess.
Present.
Councillor Cadeau.
Present.
Councillor Grant.
Present.
Councillor Schwint.
Present.
Thank you. I'll start by acknowledging the land on which we live has been here from time immemorial, and Indigenous people have lived here from time immemorial. I thank the Chinootan, also called the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee people who have lived here and cared for this land and who continue to share and steward this land with us. May we together learn to care for each other, our flora and fauna, and the land that sustains us. I'm trying to think of a good opening, and what came to mind was I walked down the street. I came into the office mid-afternoon and I walked down the street about an hour and a half later and was coughing from the smoke. So I just wanted to highlight the importance of climate change and how it affects us in so many ways. And that we can keep that in mind. I was at a strategic planning for the region this morning, and that was one of the things high on the list too, was to consider the effects of climate change and how we can work to mitigate that. So let's start with a moment of silence. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? Seeing none. We have minutes from council meeting of June 6th and the committee of the whole of June 20th. Would someone like to move them? Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Cadeau. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. We do have a public meeting. So the following portion of the meeting is for information only and no decisions will be made tonight. Any questions can be directed to Development Services staff following the meeting. I declare the planning public meeting to be open, and we will start with DS 30-2023, a zone change for Anchor Property Management. And I'll call on David Gundrum to introduce the report, please.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Shantz. Mayor Shantz, members of council. The following application is a zone change application that affects property next to the built-up area of Breslot, 285 Woolwich Street South. The applicants, in this case, Anchor Property Management, have applied to extend the provisions of an existing site-specific temporary use bylaw to allow for the storage of transport trailers on the site as outdoor storage within the agricultural zone, and extend the existing temporary use bylaw for another 3-year period. Subject lands are approximately 7 3/4 hectares in size, having approximately 256 meters of frontage along Woolwich Street South. The site's located just north of the intersection of Woolwich Street South with Fountain Street North, and the existing property contains a single detached dwelling, as well as an accessory building and a large vacant area, which is currently used for the outdoor storage of tractor trailers. Property is designated countryside and restricted land use area in the township official plan and is zoned agricultural with existing site-specific provisions to permit the outdoor parking of tractor trailers on a temporary basis, subject to conditions in the zoning bylaw. Staff will prepare a recommendation report to council at a future meeting date once all representations are known and have been considered, and that is a summary of the application and what's being considered tonight through the proposed zone change. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Mr. Gundrum. I'm looking at this report Getting some feedback here. Sorry. I'm just wondering, it's saying to extend it for 3 years. Is this the second time we've done it for 3 years?
Through the mayor, Councillor Cadeau, this would be a renewal, you could say, or it's basically renewing the existing temporary use bylaw for another 3-year period. And yes, it was previously approved in 2020 on the same 3-year basis for the same use at this site. I will also note for council's information that the lands in question were recently brought into the urban area of Breslau through ROPA 6. And that in future, and this is noted in our report, that it's anticipated that we may not need to be here again to look at a temporary use bylaw pending the updates to the township official plan and the local zoning bylaw. Does that help answer your question, Councillor Cadeau?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I suppose just as a follow-up, was this first designated or first used for transport trailer parking in 2020 then, or the first time this was done, or has this been a historic property where this has been used for that purpose?
Through the chair, Councillor Cadeau, my understanding that it's been more historic than that, 2020 wasn't, like, the trailers were parked prior to that year. And I'll also note for council that the owners have been working through the site plan control process to try and, I guess in a way, make this use a bit more formalized beyond, in anticipation that in future there won't be any more temporary renewals, renewals for the use under a temporary use bylaw. So the owners have been working through the site plan control process with the township to provide more formality to the use moving forward, and we're currently working through that parallel process with the owners at the current time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thanks. Anyone else? Okay, Sam, head of Dryden Smith and head planning. We've got lots of echoes in here tonight.
Guess I should turn this on. Hey, that works. Madam Mayor, members of council, it's hard to believe that it's been 3 years since I've been here. Is that not working?
It's given an echo.
Oh, well, you were given an echo before too. Yeah. Okay, is this better? Oh, it's still an echo. Oh.
One of the difficulties with a hybrid meeting sometimes.
See if this works now. No, it's still kind of echoing.
Still echoing? Okay, okay. Still. Can we do it without the mic?
If we do people online.
Okay,
can't
so
hear.
you cut out the live stream, right?
Okay, let's see if we can get through it with a bit of an echo until we get things settled.
Madam Mayor, I'll try and be short then, so the echo doesn't bug everybody as much as it is. It's hard to believe it's been 3 years since I've been here last on this application. With the COVID thing, it kind of delayed things getting finalized. We're here to get an extension for the use of the property. We've had the 3-year approval. Unfortunately, we didn't get the regional plan approved or the township official plan approved in that 3-year interim. So we're in the process now of waiting for the Breslau settlement plan to be finalized. And after that is done, we intend to apply for a zone change application and a site plan approval for the total property. At the present time, we're not using all the property because of the restrictions in the approved in the past. So that would be the intention, is to file a zone change application, which did the echo stop? Oh, good. It's good to have technical staff and figure out these things. So Just generally speaking, Bill has been operating his business, the truck wash and the storage of trailers in Breslau for over 34 years. So he's not planning on moving anytime soon. So we're looking to get the zoning finalized in a short-term period and get the site plan finalized. But we've been working with the GRCA to deal with the drainage that backs onto the Breslau Drain 1. And I think our engineers and the GRCA engineers have that sorted out now. So we can move forward with finalizing the site plan. So if there's any questions as council, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Head? No, I'm not seeing any. So,
Okay,
thank you.
I'll just wait for the next one because I have the next one on as well.
Okay, I'll first check if there's any unregistered participants that want to speak.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. There are no unregistered participants tonight.
Okay, thank you. Then Mr. Head, go ahead with the next one. Sorry. Oh, I guess, thank you. Is there anyone in the gallery that wished to speak to that application? No. Okay, thank you. I got to get back to public galleries. Carry on with the next one then, please.
Yeah, Mayor Shantz, members of council. So the next zone change application file, ZC 7-2023. This is very similar to the previous application that was heard. It's again for an extension, proposing a 3-year extension of a temporary use bylaw that applies to unaddressed lands adjacent to 5185 Fountain Street North, near the settlement of Breslau. This application has been applied for by a numbered company, also known as Breadner Trailers, to allow for extension of existing temporary use bylaw to allow for the on-site storage of tractor trailers on the property. The subject property in this case is vacant, containing no buildings or structures. It's approximately 3.3 hectares in size with approximately 284 meters of frontage along Fountain Street North. And again, this site is southeast of the previous site that we just spoke to the previous application. It's designated countryside and restricted land use area in the township official plan and is within the agricultural zone of the township bylaw with existing site-specific provisions which tie back to the existing temporary use zoning bylaw that was previously passed in 2020 to allow for on-site storage of tractor trailers. So that is summary of the application. And again, similar to prior, staff will prepare a recommendation report to council at a future meeting date once all representations have been made known and considered by council. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Gundrum? No, seeing none. Mr. Head.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. We've filed both of these applications at the same time, so it's convenient to deal with them at the same time again. Breadner Trailers has been in Breslau for about 56 years. They've been operating in the township since 1965, and they moved to the current location about 2003. They process and sell and lease and trade trailers about 3,000 per year. And they're looking to expand their storage area at the back, which is the area that's subject to the 3-year temporary use bylaw. Again, we will be looking at filing a zone change application and an additional site plan. There is a site plan already in place for part of it, for the balance of the property so that the whole property can be used for trailer storage. There's not much else I can say about it unless there's any questions from council. I think that would be it.
Any questions? No, I'm not seeing any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be back before actual people.
Yes. 3D.
Yeah. Good night. Thank you very much.
I'll ask the clerk if there's any unregistered participants.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. There are no unregistered participants for this item either.
Okay, and then I'll ask again if there's anyone in the gallery that wishes to speak to this item. And seeing none, since this item was for information only and there are no further speakers, I declare the planning public meeting to be closed. And now we have a very special presentation, and for this, I'm going to move to the podium. I have the pleasure this evening to award the 2023 Ontario Senior of the Year Award to Jane Groff. Jane, would you please come up to the front to receive your award? Or first stay there. Jane has lived her entire adult life in the same house on First Street in Elmira with her husband, Alan, for 56 years. They have 3 grown children, 8 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. Jane has 2 brothers and 3 sisters. As the oldest sibling, she became a reliable and responsible daughter to her now 96-year-old mother from a young age. There were many farm and household chores that needed to be done, and as a teenager, she could stack hay bales on wagons better than some men. Way to go. Jane enjoys several hobbies, including gardening, cooking, sewing, designing quilts, playing cards, reading, and diamond art. What's diamond art?
It's when you put little diamonds on a picture that's pre-done. The diamonds are about the size of a pen point, and they stick on and make a very nice picture when it's all done.
Sounds beautiful. Jane learned at an early age the importance of community following a family tragedy and continues her community service into her senior years. Jane is active in the Woolwich Seniors Association, has held official positions in the organization and is currently the treasurer. By volunteering her time, she has contributed to continuing capital improvements to the seniors' room, enhancing existing activities, and has helped to launch some new activities during her tenure with the association. In addition, Jane has volunteered for many years at St. Teresa of Avila Church in Elmira and continues to do so. She's always been a willing helper and organizer with a kind heart and a dedication to family and community. Congratulations, Jane. Thanks for all you do. That's quite a CV you've got. Okay, you're welcome to stay, but you know. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Elmira Biogas Facility Update, and we have Paul Taylor and Chuck Martin. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Shantz, members of council. My name is Paul Taylor. I'm employed by the company that owns and operates the biogas plant at the north end of town. I'm here tonight to give you an informal update on our plan for the next couple of years and suggestion of Clerk Smith. We are undergoing a more formal notice and consultation process as well associated with the planned expansion of our facility. I have a presentation, and I should warn you that I'm going to be looking to the right on a regular basis to tee the advancement of the slides, and not yet. And that's not a nervous quirk, and it's not any indication of how I feel about members on the left side of the room. So yes, we can advance to the next slide. Before I get into talking about the facility, I just want to highlight there has been a change of ownership in recent years. For those of you who are familiar with the history of this facility, about 2 years ago, in August of 2021, the new owner and owner today is an entity called SBE Limited Partnership, which is 80% owned. It is a partnership, and it's 80% owned by something called the Skyline Clean Energy Fund, which is headquartered in Guelph. Skyline is a very large real estate investment trust organization. They own massive numbers of apartments and commercial properties, including, for instance, the Foodland property here in Elmira, but coast to coast. And they've also recently moved into purchasing solar energy facilities and biogas facilities such as our own. The remaining 20% stake of the ownership stays with the Martin family. Chuck Martin is here with me tonight. Many of you will probably know Chuck and members of his family. And it's worth noting that even with a change in ownership, there's been no change in operational staff or day-to-day management approach to the company. Everything is as it's been since 2014. So to orient you a little bit, if you're not overly familiar with the plant, this is an aerial photo of our facility seen from the north, looking back towards town. We're right at the northern limit of the urban area. In the center of the photo is our facility with the green domes on it. You can see Elmira Pet Products up there, kind of in the top right corner, the High Street residential area right up at the top of the photo. And then there's an open area to the left, east of our existing facility. That's part of our property, and that is generally where we plan to expand our facility. I think probably not a lot of people really understand what we do up there. It's this really weird looking building with all these green domes on it. First time I saw it, I was very unclear myself. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an introduction to what the plant does. We essentially take organic waste materials, principally those collected in green bin programs from municipalities in Ontario as a feedstock. And in addition, we also take a lot of process waste in from the food production industry. So these tend to be things like wash waters, fats, oils, and greases, and other byproducts of food production that really are too high strength to be going into municipal sewer systems and into municipal wastewater treatment plants. And so those producers tend to put some of those byproducts in tank trailers, and they come to our facility for further processing. From these feedstocks, we make two things. Essentially, we make a lot of renewable energy. That's our primary business and reason for existing. And we also make a certified organic agricultural fertilizer. From a provincial perspective, we're actually one of the larger processors of green bin organics in the province of Ontario. There's only a handful of facilities in Ontario that offer this kind of service. To do that, truckloads of green bin material arrive at our facility in tractor trailers. They're taken inside the building, doors are closed, they're unloaded in a sealed environment with an odor control system. And those wastes are unloaded and they're pulverized in large mills in the presence of a lot of water to make this kind of soupy mush. And from there, that material goes through some very fancy, expensive European equipment we've accumulated over the years that separates the clean organic food waste that is our real feedstock from undesirable contaminants like plastic bags, glass, bits of metal, ceramics, and the like. And then that clean slurry material, we call it, is then fermented at the facility for about 3 weeks in those big tanks that you see. And that produces continuously biogas, which is a gas that simply bubbles up out of this soupy material and is collected and contained in the green domes that you see on top of those large tanks. The biogas itself can then be used, is continuously drawn off 24 hours a day to, in our case today, generate renewable electricity, or can also be scrubbed because it's very similar to natural gas. It can be cleaned and scrubbed and actually used as a substitute to natural gas. So we do produce obviously meaningful amounts of renewable energy. The photograph you see here shows one of two 2,000 horsepower electrical generators that are operating 24 hours a day at the facility, producing electricity from the biogas. We produce 3 megawatts of electricity that's simply sold into the Ontario electrical grid. And we are planning in the next phase to add the ability to produce renewable natural gas, alternatively from the biogas at our facility. That gas, once it's produced, will simply be sold into the existing Enbridge natural gas grid that operates in southwestern Ontario. And in so doing, those molecules of gas are going to end up being consumed here in Elmira by natural gas consumers in this business and home consumers in this community. And in so doing, we'll end up getting a lot of our natural gas in town from a plant up at the north end of town rather than from Alberta or Saskatchewan or wherever our natural gas comes from today. So we'll be promoting a lot of local, long-term local energy self-reliance. And then the other thing that we do, again, is we produce this certified organic fertilizer. The photo in this case is one I took some years ago in a field in Drayton. It's a field of oats. On the left side of the screen are just oats, and on the right side of the screen are oats growing with our fertilizer having been applied to it, which might give you some idea of why this particular farmer, we deal with about 60 farms in the area. This particular farmer is a continuing customer of ours year after year. We currently produce about 100,000 plus tons of that agricultural fertilizer every year. It's all used locally in Waterloo, Wellington, in part because it's a liquid. We can't really afford to truck it very far, but the demand for it locally exceeds the supply, so that doesn't create any problems for us. We've also had a certified organic approval on our fertilizer for 6 or 7 years now. We have to renew that every year. The independent certifiers that come in love our plant and our product. And we have worked hand in hand with the Ministry of Agriculture and Food kind of from the early days and on a continuing basis, doing field trials and research with this product, and they too are very fond of it. So we're here because we plan to expand the facility. Because the province of Ontario has a continuing and growing need to have more processing capacity for organic waste, green bin, and other types of organic waste, so that we can continue this growing track record of keeping those things out of landfill. And of course, at the same time, we need more renewable energy. And then finally, we'll make more fertilizer as a result. And given the fact that we can't meet the current demand for it locally, that'll be good news, I think, in the local agricultural community if we are able to generate more of that material as well. Our plan is to double the plant's capacity from what it is today. That's the essence of it. Using the same kind of technologies, machinery, operating systems, control systems as we have today, we're really not planning on changing anything. We're just going to increase our capacity. And we will be increasing our headcount. We're not a giant employer, but we will be increasing our headcount to about 25 people. And for the most part, those are very high-paying jobs. Got my 7 minutes? Almost done. Okay. I was told I was invited by the clerk, actually, that didn't apply, but almost there. Just one last slide here. So actually, the next slide, please. So we are one of a number of industries in Elmira and the surrounding area that rely on heavy trucks to be able to operate our businesses. It's a reality that many of us face, and we all know that heavy truck traffic, particularly downtown, is an issue. We all know that the region has talked about building a bypass around downtown Elmira for a long time to relieve downtown of this burden. None of us can control that. We have been led to understand that one of the potential routes currently being considered by the region would pass right past the eastern limits of our property. And so if that comes to pass, we fully intend to access. We will build a direct access off our property directly onto the bypass, and in so doing, be able to remove all of our truck traffic from downtown Elmira when that day comes. And that is my presentation. Any questions from council would be welcomed.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, questions? Councillor Kiddo.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, to the delegate, I just want to thank you for that presentation. It gives me a much better sense of some of the work, some of the awesome work that goes on at Biogas. Two main byproducts as a result of this, one being the fertilizer, the other being the energy. Is there any waste byproduct as a result of the slurry or the processing?
For you, Madam Mayor, absolutely. So all those plastic bags and glass bottles and weird things that people put in their green bins, we separate out and they go to landfill disposal. City of Toronto brought us a mattress. We get bedding, hubcaps, brake drums, pieces of concrete. People put stuff in their green bins. But we're very adept using almost entirely automated equipment and separating it out. There's none of it left in the fertilizer product, but there is a chunk of material that has to go to disposal.
Anyone else? Thank you for the presentation. It's always really interesting. We tend to be kind of quiet about some of the good things we do. And so it's really good to hear your presentation. I wonder if it'd be worthwhile to do that presentation for regional council as well.
I should admit while I'm here, Madam Mayor, or acknowledge that there's also a separate public formal consultation process that we're going through. I should just mention that. So you might have noticed there were ads in the Observer in recent weeks, half-page ads, letting people know that there is a public meeting coming up at the Elmira Lions Hall on July 20th at 7:30. Will be an opportunity for people to consult. We have had to provide formal copies of our 2 4-inch binders of our application to the Environment Ministry, both to the township and to the region as well. So there is an additional process. This was just an informal conversation tonight.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. I did have a question when you were going through it. When you talked about producing 3 megawatts, can you put that into some kind of framework that I could understand? What would that power?
Yeah, we've tried in the past to put that in Elmira terms, and you can't find out how much electricity is consumed in Elmira, even residentially, never mind some of the large industrial consumers. Producing electricity, it's somewhere around maybe 1/3 or so of what's consumed in the homes of Elmira, to pick a number out of the air, order of magnitude. In doubling the size of the plant and switching over to natural gas, we'll probably be producing more natural gas than all of Elmira consumes. So Skyline, our hosts, I don't know how many properties they have, but it's a vast number. And they've calculated that the output of our plant would more than meet all of the demands for heating all of their apartment buildings and all their commercial and retail properties across the whole country once we have this up and running. So it will be a substantive amount of energy that will be produced from garbage from places like Markham and Barrie. It's just crazy. Here in Elmira, people come for tours from very far to see it.
It's pretty impressive. Thank you.
Just quickly, if I may, through you, Mayor, to the delegates, if we're processing this much and you're doubling capacity, there's obviously a market for this. I'm wondering, is there even additional market in this green bin, and where is some of this waste ending up if it's not coming to a place like biogas or further processing? You know?
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor. You're asking, are there other green bin wastes that are not finding a home like this?
That's right. And because potentially there are other destinations for green bins, it just speaks to, the uniqueness of the business model that you have in generating such a wonderful product. I'm just wondering, could there be even more capacity to, grow in the future?
So it's kind of interesting. I used to be in the composting of green bin waste in an earlier career. And in the last decade or so, Ontario has shifted from composting all of its green bin material in private and public facilities, the output being compost, no energy recovery, to moving to this model that we employ. City of Toronto built and owns 2 plants like ours for their own purposes. And there are 3 others currently like us operating elsewhere in Ontario. There are more that are proposed. So there's a gradual transition away from composting to this model, driven by the greenhouse gas agenda, principally.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, we have delegations. First of all, zone change application 5/2023, Chadwick and Shannon Regier. Mr. Gunder.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Mayor, members of council, the following zone change application ZC 5/2023 concerns two properties located at 1441 Cedar Spring Road, which is a existing farm property containing a single detached dwelling and a barn. And an adjacent property to the west at 1475 Cedar Spring Road, which is a non-farm residential property in the agricultural zone, containing an existing single detached dwelling and a pond and private laneway. And I'll also mention the farm property also contains an accessory shed, which does concern the application at hand today. So on May 30th, 2023, the public meeting was held with Township Council to consider this zone change. Township staff are recommending a refusal of this application, which proposes to recognize a reduced lot size for the farm parcel at 1441 Cedar Spring Road of 7.85 hectares, and to also recognize a reduced lot size of 1.86 hectares for the non-farm property to the west to facilitate a future land severance between the two properties that would convey approximately 0.65 hectares or 1.61 acres between the farm property and the non-farm property. In our reviews, township staff have found that the zone change application does not meet the policies of the provincial policy statement, which concerns severance of property within prime agricultural areas for legal or technical reasons. This glossary definition in the PPS is generally reserved for resolving issues related to minor encroachments with respect to such items as septic systems, water supply, or private infrastructure that's required for existing land uses. There is no encroachment occurring in this case. And also section 231 of the PPS identifies that properties in prime agricultural areas are to be protected over the long term for agricultural use. This zone change, again, would facilitate a future severance that would reduce the size of the existing farm parcel by approximately 1.5 acres. While the proposed severance would not affect any of the existing cultivated areas, it would have the net effect of reducing the existing farm property and the size of the existing farm property, and therefore reducing its future farm production potential. So on those bases, staff have found that the application does not meet the pertinent policies of the PPS. With respect to the regional official plan, similar to the PPS, section 6E16 of the ROP does permit minor lot line adjustments within prime agricultural areas to correct for encroachment of existing building structures, private wells, septic systems. None of those situations are triggering in this case, and therefore this portion of the ROP is not applicable. This particular section of the ROP, section 6E16, also states that minor adjustments to the boundaries between farm parcels and adjacent non-farm parcels are permitted where the size of the farm operation in question is not decreased. And although, again, echoing from the statements made regarding the PPS, although the existing cultivated area of the farm is not proposed to change as a result of the intended severance, the farm parcel as a whole would be reduced in size by approximately 1.5 or 1.6 acres. It's the opinion of township planning staff, and this is also echoed in the comments that have been received by regional planning staff, and that we're both in agreement that the subject application does not meet or is not consistent with the applicable policies of the regional official plan. With respect to the township official plan, the subject lands are within the countryside designation of the township OP. They form part of a prime agricultural area as recognized by the plan, containing class 1, 2, or 3 capable soils. And consistent with the ROP, the township OP provides allowance under section 6 for minor lot line adjustments between abutting farm and non-farm lots, where these adjustments are intended to address conformity with respect to existing patterns of exclusive use and or to correct for issues created by the encroachment of existing buildings, structures, private wells, and septic systems on abutting lots. As there is no encroachment occurring, this policy of the Township OP is not applicable. Furthermore, noting for council, and this is stated in our report, that the existing use being a shed structure or Quonset hut structure rather, measuring approximately 294 square meters in size, was constructed on the farm property in 2011 with outside of a building permit process. Given the limited period of time that this use has existed on the property, in contravention of our local zoning regulations, it cannot be said to constitute an historic pattern of established use on the property. So on these bases, planning staff have found that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to facilitate the lot line adjustment is not consistent with the applicable policies of the township official plan. Both subject properties are within the agricultural zone of the township zoning bylaw. The severance sketch provided by the applicants proposes to recognize a reduced minimum lot area of 1.86 hectares for the non-farm lot located at 1475 Cedar Spring Road, while recognizing a reduced minimum lot area of 7.85 hectares for the farm property at 1441 Cedar Spring Road. The site-specific zoning also proposes to recognize an increased maximum accessory building size of 294 square meters for the existing accessory structure that was established in 2011 that would form part of the expanded non-farm residential lot. Since the proposed zone change would work to further reduce the size of the existing undersized farm parcel at 1441 Cedar Spring Road, it's staff's opinion that the application cannot be said to be consistent with the intent and purpose of the agricultural zone in this case, and as well that the proposed maximum size of the accessory building would be more than double what the existing upper limit is of 112 square meters for a non-farm related accessory building in the agricultural zone. Therefore, it is staff's opinion that the proposed zone change is not consistent with the intended purpose of the zoning bylaw as it regards both farm parcel size and allowable maximum accessory building size in the agricultural zone. So that is summary of the application proposed before you tonight, and also a summary of our recommendation. So again, it's staff's opinion that the application be denied on the basis, or be refused rather, on the basis that it's not consistent with the applicable policies of provincial policy statement, township official plan, regional official plan, and does not meet the intent and purpose of the agricultural zone under the township zoning bylaw. So that is a summary of the application and our recommendation to council, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that members of council may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Gunder? Councillor Schwint.
Accessory buildings on these rural properties. Typically, I know there's 112 is above the maximum, but isn't there a typical rule of thumb that staff will support on these larger properties? And what is that?
Through the mayor, Councillor Schwint, really it's on a case-by-case basis. The 112 square meter limit is a limit on accessory structures in the agricultural zone where the use of that structure is accessory to a residence. It could be a non-farm residence, it could be a farm-related residence. That 112 square meter limit would not apply to any farm-related structures like drive sheds for farm equipment, outbuildings that serve a farm-related purpose. So the 112 is really to limit the size of a residentially related accessory structure in the agricultural zone. The main intent of that upper limit of 112 is to ensure that these structures don't become used for some sort of non-residential, non-farm related purpose. And especially on a smaller non-farm residential lot in the agricultural zone where there is no farm activity or there's barely any ability for there ever to be farm related or agriculturally related activity. That 112 square meter limit serves a very strong purpose in limiting the use of these structures to being purely residential in nature, such that they can't be used for other uses that are not considered or permitted under the agricultural zone. So does that help answer your question, Councillor Schwint?
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other ones. Thank you, Mr. Gunder. Before we hear from the delegate this evening, I need to read some instructions. You have a maximum of 7 minutes to speak unless Councillor Clerk has set a different time. There will be a timer on the screen and you will hear a warning when you have 1 minute and another when your time is up. Once you're finished, please wait for questions of clarification from council. When there are no more questions, please return to your seat. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the discussion and or meeting if you'd like to, and you're also welcome to leave quietly whenever you wish. Council discussion and debate will start when all questions of clarification have finished. And now I would welcome Scott Patterson of Patterson Planning Consultants. Welcome and perfect.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. Again, I'm Scott Patterson from Patterson Planning Consultants, here tonight on behalf of Nevin and April Martin, who are the owners of 1441 Cedar Spring, and Chad and Shannon Rieger, the owners of 1475 Cedar Spring. First off, I just wanted to pass along the landowners' regrets. They definitely wanted to be here this evening, but they have public school graduations that they're both attending. Especially the Riegers. This is very important to them. They definitely wanted to be here in support of the application, but their daughter's grade 8 graduation, I think, took precedence over this. So apologies from both of them for not being here. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to quickly run through the project again for council. As noted, I was here on May 30th for the public meeting. This is a zoning bylaw amendment application to support a future consent application for a lot addition. And as Mr. Gunderman noted, is to convey 1.6 acres of the Martin property at 1441 Cedar Spring Road to the Rieger property at 1475 Cedar Spring Road. The zoning would recognize the new lot sizes, apply land use regulations for each property, and a site-specific permission would be granted to reflect the existing accessory residential building, which is currently used by the Rieger family. And a consent application would follow after that. Next slide, please. So this is the current conditions on site, just to refresh council, the red outline being the Martin property, the blue outline being the Rieger property. Next slide. And this would be the end result if council were to support the severance, with the Martin property being 19.4 acres and the Rieger property increased to about 4.56 acres. Next slide, please. And of course, the reason we're here tonight is the existing shed on site. Contrary to what Mr. Gundrum had said, I do believe there is an encroachment. Naturally, it is the encroachment of the shed itself. The shed is owned by the Rieger family. It was constructed off-site inadvertently, from my understanding. And there's also the encroachment of the existing driveways and other features on site. So there definitely is an encroachment onto the neighboring lands. Next slide, please. And again, just for council's reference, this is the existing shed on site. Again, solely used by the Rieger family. It has no heat, has a dirt floor, but does have hydro for lights. Next slide. So as Mr. Gundrum had noted, the provincial policy statement does allow for agricultural areas, lot additions for legal and technical reasons. It appears at this point that there's a significant difference of opinion between myself and the planning department. And this is definitely not the position I wanted to find myself in or find my clients in this evening. I have reviewed case law, LPAT decisions, OLT decisions, and there really is no clear direction on this matter. It's on a subject or case by case basis. But based on my review and analysis of the documentation, the legislation, et cetera, I came to a completely different conclusion than planning staff. And I'd like to note that the usable farmland of the Martin property is being maintained. And it is highly unlikely that the sloped area, including the lot addition, will ever be used for anything other than what currently exists. So recognizing that the staff report does not support the 1.6 acre proposal, something that I would like to table for council's consideration this evening is a reduced proposal. Essentially, this just squares off the existing property and it would reduce the potential lot addition in the future down to 1 acre. This was the proposal that came forward for pre-consultation with the township. I was then asked to increase the size of the proposal and include it to 1.6 acres. In discussing this with both the Martins and the Riegers, this is something they would consider dropping it back to a 1 acre lot addition. If that was something that was more appealable or something that council could support. Next slide, please. And if that were the case, the yellow outline on screen is basically what the 1 acre lot addition would look like if it were to be affected. Next slide. So I'm here tonight on behalf of both the property owners to ask council to support either the original proposal, ideally, or potentially the alternative proposal for the reduced lot area. In my opinion, if the overall goal is to protect lands for agricultural production, then this achieves that principle. And the staff report came out after my presentation was uploaded. So I just have a few things in the staff report that I wanted to speak to. It is noted in the staff report that the Riegers have leased the structure. And as I'd noted, the structure is the Riegers. The shed is theirs. It was constructed on the Martin property without a building permit. I have met the Riegers. I've reviewed the shed. In my 26 years of doing this, I do believe it was inadvertent. They didn't know. And I think they advised the township accordingly after it was constructed. And they entered into a lease negotiation with the Martins, and that's been in place ever since. So I just want to make it sure that council knows it's not the Martins building. It is actually the Riegers building. Secondly, there is notes in the staff report that says that this conveyance would impact the ability to convert underutilized areas of land for primary farm production purposes. I grew up on a farm. I've been raised on a farm for 50 years. I have no idea what you would use that area of the property for on the Martin property for farm production. It is sloped. There is a grade change between the two properties. I have talked to Mr. Gundam about this, and I just don't see what you would use those lands for. The area of the Martin property that has been farmed consistently in that way for many years. I do have air photos with me if anyone would like to see them since 2000 to 2022, and the air photos were last taken. The area of farming on the Martin property is exactly the same as it was 22 years ago. I don't have access to air photos before that, but I suspect it's the same consideration. Finally, or maybe not, legalizing the accessory building at the current size would allow the potential for it to be used for non-residential purposes due to its size. Again, I've been to the site. I've been in the shed. I've seen what they use it for. It is for their personal belongings. They have a trailer in there. They have personal vehicles, tools for doing yard work, lawnmowers, the typical things you would see to maintain a property of that size. We did confirm for staff that the Riegers do own a building in Elmira that they conduct their home renovation business out of. So I personally do not see an issue with the building being used in its current configuration. It was actually quite full. But there is no consideration at this time for the Riegers to conduct their business from a home base. They have a facility in town that they do that from. So I just want to make sure council is very clear on that as well. And I think that's it. Again, I'm here in full support of the application that we submitted. I would ask council for their consideration on behalf of the property owners to give it a favorable review in either the 1.6 acres or the reduction down to 1 acres. Both property owners are satisfied with either. But this would rectify the issue of the shed and would bring some comfort to these property owners that that shed could remain in its current location going forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there were any from council.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Through you to the delegate. How did this encroachment happen? Because that's a big area to be building driveways on and sheds when you don't own it. I don't quite understand how you could deviate from your lot line by that huge of an area.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Naturally, I wasn't there in 2011 when this was constructed, My understanding is that the shed was built, again, inadvertently on the Martin property. A lease negotiation was arranged to allow them to continue to use the shed. The township was made aware of that at the time. Naturally, the images you see now of the extension of the driveway and stuff like that has happened since then. It's just been a continuation of the lease. It's been a continuation of how to get access to the shed, how to use the shed. I didn't pull up an air photo from 2011 to confirm that, but I suspect the driveway and things you're seeing is just a continued advancement of how to use the building itself.
So the original driveway didn't deviate at all? It stayed on their own lot? Because it looks like it's been there for quite some time. That's why I'm questioning.
Yeah, and through you, Madam Mayor, I also question that as well, just the orientation of the existing house. I don't know if you can go back to that air photo. But the garage of the existing house is on that end of the house, like towards the shed. I've questioned that as well, like how they could get in and out of their garage. But the existing house was built with a permit in that location. It does meet zoning setbacks from what I can tell. But I agree, like that they do almost need to encroach on that property just to get in their garage, to make the turn and get in access into their garage that exists.
Other questions? No. Seeing none? Oh, seeing some. Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. This may be actually for Mr. Gundrum. I'm just wondering, you mentioned the previous proposal was smaller and staff had asked us to, or asked you to increase the size.
Through you, Madam Mayor, for any application like this, we have to go through pre-consultation.
Okay.
So the pre-consultation materials that I submitted to the municipality were for the reduced lot size, the 1 acre lot size, the alternative proposal that I showed. Staff did not recommend anything at the time.
Okay.
That recommendation to increase the lot size actually came from the Martin family. So when I presented the application, prepared the materials, I'm the one that actually increased the lot size based on their request. It had nothing to do with staff.
Okay, I wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Okay.
Thank you.
Council, there's a recommendation in front of you. Councillor Schwint.
This is going to be an interesting one because I think this is the type of issue. That's why I got involved in municipal politics and at the township level. We're here to represent our neighbors and improve our community. I look at this application and I'm a farmer. If thought Martin property was a mirror image and the farm land was abutting the regular property, not a piece of gravel pit that won't grow good weeds, I couldn't support this proposal. If we're having that additional lot in that area, I could not support this proposal. But the way it's situated now, we are making something work for both parties and the entire neighborhood. We're elected as a local council to represent our neighbors because people in Toronto who set policy can't foresee every eventuality. In that case, we have 100-acre lots up and down that side road, not 20-acre parcel here and a 4-acre parcel there. So we're dealing with reality. And the reality is this does not affect farmland. The Martins will farm as much land as they've got, as they have forever and a day. And that gravel pit area won't do anything. It doesn't encroach on farming operations that neighbor the property. So because of a change of lot line, a neighbor can still build a barn where he would build a barn otherwise. So it doesn't affect neighboring farm operations, which is the intent of the Planning Act. We want to keep farms in business. I do have some notes here. As I mentioned, it's an imperfect world. So we have to deal with imperfect lot sizes. But I think we've got the opportunity here to make something work for two individuals, their neighbors. Why wouldn't we support that? So I'd make the motion to accept the proposal as presented by the applicants.
The 1 acre or the 1.6?
To me, it's irrelevant, so 1.6.
Okay. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Burgess? Anyone else want to speak to the motion? Councillor Burgess, since you seconded it, you can speak first.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, I just kind of want to repeat a bit of what's been said here, that the application makes sense here. If you look at the picture, you can see the big wave in the headlands of the farmed area. So even if he did want to farm more, he's not doing it right now. It's just gravel, or it was a gravel pit. And there's a large gradient there. So it is a natural separation of the property. And that might be part of the reason to Bonnie's comment of why you did build there, because it is almost a separated property already with that gradient. And again, just squaring off the property makes sense too. Right now it's encroaching on his house per se, and you wouldn't even be able to build a barn there or anything else because you wouldn't meet the minimum distances. So yes, it is prime agricultural land zone, but you can't grow anything there. It's not an advantage to the farmer for keeping that 1 acre. It would make sense to me to be able to sever this.
Okay, Councillor Grant and then Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. I would agree with both Councillor Schwint and Councillor Burgess. I know the report talked about historical use and that the shed itself wouldn't necessarily fall under that, but I feel when we look at the aerial photo, it's clear that there's historical use of the farm and where they're actually farming. So again, I feel that this is why it doesn't come into keeping with the policies that we currently have. I think that in this case, it is like a case by case basis that this kind of makes sense to square that property off.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. I guess my question is to staff. Does this create a precedent going forward where we've got somebody that's built a shed without a permit and then now they're looking to sever the property to bring everything into conformity? Are we creating problems for ourselves going forward?
Mr. Gundry.
Through the mayor, Councillor Bryant, that's a very good question. The best answer that I can give from a staff perspective is that it doesn't create a precedent for staff in terms of our own independent evaluation of future applications, because we have to evaluate each application independently on its own merits with respect to the policies that apply. So, I mean, this may sound a bit weird, but if somebody walked in our door tomorrow and they had an application that was 95, 99% the same as this one, we wouldn't look to a past decision to base our evaluation and our recommendation upon. Now that's from a staff perspective. What I will say is that, you know, we've found that it doesn't meet the intent of the policies under the PPS, the ROP and the OP, because we've judged that the severance that this would facilitate in the future, we don't deem to be minor in nature, that we can't get there with the policies that we have to live with in our evaluation. But in terms of like future applications that staff would evaluate, no single application creates a precedent for our future evaluations, at least from a staff perspective and a staff evaluation perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Clerk Smith.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Through you. I'm just wondering if the mover of the motion would consider something more along the lines of approve the application and bring forward an amending bylaw to the zoning bylaw, which would affect the change. That's sort of typical in a zone change application.
That's not what I said.
That's what I heard.
Mayor Shantz, through you, I'll just ask Deputy Clerk Alex Smith to pull up a draft of that bylaw for council, just in case we prepared that for you tonight. So this is sort of what it would look like, and if you want, you can pass this bylaw this evening.
So that'll be at the end of the meeting when we go and do bylaws, in case anyone's wondering. Councillor Cadell.
Thank you, Mayor. Just being devil's advocate a little bit, we do have an alternative proposal in front of us as well, and I think that it would be at least worthwhile to consider the differences. I know that you know, for Councillor Schwint, it might be a moot point, but if we really are trying to protect as much farmland as we can, you know, the numbers, they matter. So it may be unfarmable land. It may not be. Perhaps it could be land that could be, you know, reused by a future owner if it ever gets sold. We just don't know. There's a lot of unknowns there. So if there is an option to reduce that footprint even by a little, I would certainly be open to taking it. So I'm wondering if the movers would consider an amendment of that nature.
Councillor Schwint.
I guess living across the road from that property in the past, I don't see how we can reclaim that land. In my personal opinion, the environment would better served with the regular zoning it and hopefully allowing as many trees or put some topsoil in to allow some trees to grow on the slope. And that's a better outcome than the Martins trying to get 2 more rows of corn in and having more erosion. That's my personal opinion. I understand trying to keep the farmland. I just can't see a way that this is farmland.
So movers sticking with the 1.6 acres, so there is a motion on the floor if no one else wants to speak. Councillor Bryant.
I would agree with Councillor Cadeau. I would like to see it at the reduced size to the 1.1 acre or the 1 acre versus the 1.6.
Okay, Councillor Grant.
I could also get behind that as well. I think it strikes a fair compromise in that we're trying to stick to the policy as much as possible of preserving as much agricultural land as possible while also granting the applicant kind of a compromised approach to what they want.
Okay, I look to the mover and seconder.
I can compromise if the seconder can.
I'm good with that.
Okay. I'll look to the clerk to get the wording right. Yes, thank you.
Mayor Shantz, I think we have the wording at the smaller size, the alternative proposal as put forward this evening. We'll make the necessary amendments to that bylaw. If you're comfortable with that, I think we can still pass it this evening.
Okay, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Moving on to unfinished business, we have an active transportation master plan. This is coming forward from our committee meeting last week, and staff have provided a revised recommendation for council. Discussion, I guess I'll look to Mr. Poupé, Mr. Vanderhoff. There she is. There he is. Mr. Vink.
Good evening, council. Yes, this is just following up from last week's discussion where I guess we kind of got to the point, council got to the point of accepting the active transportation master plan as a report, but just what the wording was going to be in the actual recommendation wasn't finalized, and we're looking for staff to recraft something along the lines of the discussion. We're hoping this is close, just basically then accepting the plan and kind of giving direction to staff of how to implement, which I think was a question of how it would be handled. So we're hoping this is the appropriate direction for council, and or we can tweak this as you need to, but this would just give staff those opportunities, A, to implement it where appropriate, and then obviously then to bring forward things accordingly in terms of a budgeting process or comments, so you would know what was coming forward during a road reconstruction or something, what might be an active transportation cost above and beyond normal. So staff council could, staff would recommend in certain cases where that would be appropriate, and then you would have that recommendation at the time. So we're hoping this captures everything. We're looking forward to just kind of finalizing this approach. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Council, do you like the wording? Do you feel like wordsmithing, Councillor Schwint?
This is a meeting that keeps on giving for me. I was struggling with this one again because as we saw in the previous item, when we have things set in regulation or policy, that's the way it's going to be. And I struggle that staff aren't given leeway to take into consideration the circumstances in individual spot. So I had 4 different action items instead of these 3. Mine works to accept the report for information purposes, to direct staff to consider active transportation when setting development charges, and direct staff to consider application when planning reconstruction projects. So consider was the word I was using, and direct staff to seek and obtain funding opportunities where appropriate for active transportation projects.
You get that?
I even typed it out. I don't know how.
Okay, we're gonna get that to the clerk so we can get the correct wording. And while we're doing that, any other comments,
Well,
Councillor Kiddo?
I mean, I've also taken a stab at wordsmithing, but I rather appreciate what Councillor Schwint has put forth. When I'm looking at a lot of these, and I may be looking at older bullets, and I do apologize. The one that I'm looking at still has the 4 bullets. Have we switched it to 3 now?
There are 4. It's direct
There are
staff
4.
to include funding for projects in the plan as appropriate and future development charges updates.
Okay, so this is the one that I'm looking at. So if I'm looking at number 4, so you can apply for funding for applicable projects, for example, that is okay. I definitely agree with this, but I think that there's an added layer that we need to add. So what do I have here? Provided that these funding sources align with the council's fiscal responsibilities and long-term fiscal planning. So what I mean by that is in this report that was provided to us, it made it very clear that for each kilometer of active transportation trail, it's going to have maintenance costs. It's going to have all of these, upkeep costs associated with them. So it's great to get this infrastructure built, especially if we can get grant money to do that. But we also need to make sure that any new active transportation routes are added with our fiscal responsibility and long-term financial planning taken into account. So that's something that I would like to see added to that 4th bullet there.
Were you able to capture that? Okay. Is it possible to get that up on the screen? Yes. Anyone else while we're getting it up on the screen? No. Sing, dance, anything? Councillor Kiddo?
Maybe Councillor Schwint can just repeat his first one, because I think that I had some very similar messaging, and I just want to make sure that it is consistent. Did you email it? Okay.
Accept the report for information purposes.
Sorry, if I may potentially add something to the 3rd bullet where it says direct staff to consider active transportation when planning reconstruction projects. Direct staff to review implementation for future reconstruction, recommending locations where the same would be most appropriate, and the potential additional costs of the same as part of the annual budget deliberations and part of the 5-year capital forecast. Did you get all that, Jeff?
Through you, Mayor Schwantz, I wonder if you could email that to me as well.
I
Not
can.
quite that fast.
I certainly can. I struggle to do that if there isn't a level of agreement, or if people just think that this is getting a little bit too technical. I would hate for that to be the case. But I certainly can send it out.
Madam.
Yeah,
For clarification, what Councillor Cadeau read was just part of the recommendation in front of council, number 3. He read the last 2/3 of that section, basically.
Recommending locations where the
Yes.
same would be most appropriate. Oh, okay.
So that would save the clerk a bunch of
Okay.
typing and retyping.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pink.
Okay. Did someone move that, or are we just wordsmithing at this point? Councillor
I'm
Schwint,
happy to move it if that's where we're at.
I'll second.
seconded by Councillor Grant. Is there further discussion?
I think I just need a minute to read it from start to finish.
Take a minute. I guess I would ask, is number 2 specific enough to use for development charges? To Jeremy or Deanne? Yeah, okay. Are we ready to call the question? Yeah. Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay. Road grading in the Township of Woolwich, and this one is Mr. Poupet. There we go.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz, and through you to members of council. So staff were directed at the behest of council to go away and look at how we perform our grading operations. So we have Manager of Operations Carter McGuire with us, and I apologize. This is one of the problems for being in person. There I am. Sorry. So Carter McGuire is here as well to answer any questions that council may have. So I think we provided council with sort of what we generally do. Staff have determined cost per attendance on a gravel road. In this case, it was Reid's Wood, given the unique request that Elmira District Community Living has presented council. So with that, I think we could turn it back to council and maybe ask any questions, and we'll be happy to answer.
Questions, Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Director Poupet, more to Mr. McGuire. Thank you for providing that information in such a short matter of time. There is really helpful to kind of see not just the process, but also how you can calculate the dollar figure there as well. So definitely appreciate that. I think that, you know, we have those 3, potentially 4 times where we may grade. And so to have that number figure is what an additional one would cost is certainly helpful. If we were to go forward with an additional grading, you mentioned that going around the time where the calcium coating wouldn't be a feasible time, just because if you graded after that, it would kind of rip it up a bit or you know, take away from its efficacy. So I suppose if I put it back on you, if there was a good time to add an additional grading to this road, when would you be looking to fit that in the schedule? Would it be in the spring? Would it be in the fall? Would it be as needed? Like, I'm trying to get a sense on if we were to, as a council, direct additional grading of this road, when it would take place, what value it would add, and the like of that. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Cadeau. Typically, I would suggest that additional grading, if we were to set it in the schedule, would fall in August or September, breaking the kind of period between our fall grading and our spring grading and our calcium program, where it would be an equal amount of time. To kind of speak to that, because we maintain our roads to the minimum maintenance standards, there are times where a road, based on weather conditions and excessive traffic, it's not that we only hit them 3 times a year. When we see that a road has exceeded the minimum maintenance standards, we will go out and address those at the time. Reid's Wood, at this point, we know that there's extended traffic because of the detour on Church Street. We will probably likely have to see that road again because of the amount of traffic on it. But if we were to set a schedule in there, I would suggest that it would be late summer, just prior to the fall, so we can get that equal amount on a regular year, knowing that we have that set traffic amount per day. I would say that it would be that time would be optimal.
Anyone else? Councillor Schwint.
I'm curious about grading. So if there's additional passes done during the year, I'm assuming we do it sooner so the potholes aren't as deep. Does that mean it's quicker and easier to get the job done, or not really?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Schwint.
The time that takes the most grading for us is in the spring, where depending on the depth of the hole or the deficiency that we're getting at, we may have to take 2 attempts at it. You can only remove so much material per pass because of the loss of traction in the equipment. Because the vehicle or the grader only travels at 5 kilometers an hour, after we've done that initial spring grading to get rid of the majority of the deficiencies on that roadway after the winter season, it's pretty much the same amount of time per kilometer for every road within the township. The only difference would be length of mob, like time to travel to that location. So yeah, it wouldn't be a shorter, long, it would be the same amount of time. Does that answer your question?
Yep, that helps. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else? I think if there's, are we looking for a direction if council wishes to change the schedule, I think?
Yeah, to you, Mayor Johnson, Council. I think the challenge that we're up against is we had done an assessment regarding asphalt conversion to go from gravel to asphalt. Or this was an alternative, is we could attend the site a little more frequently. And this was the cost. And we had heard from EDCL sort of the cost that they were incurring as a result of the condition of the roadway. The one thing that's important to understand is it's not going to be perfect. I mean, we went on a roads tour, we saw various gravel roads in various conditions. And that is really predominant on the amount of traffic that we get, weather conditions and those kinds of patterns too. So, I mean, it will be the best we can do, but it certainly won't be an asphalt. That is, we'll say the creme de la creme of a road, obviously, is that asphalt roadway that is being maintained. So I just wanted council to be aware of that, but staff would be looking for direction just to know what we're looking at from a budgetary perspective coming into 2024.
Can I just ask a question with the detours? I know they're not signed to Reid Woods, but are we anticipating more traffic on that road this summer?
To you, Mayor Shantz, I would suspect so. As the detour is weighing on, I think people find quicker routes, and we didn't say that out loud, but yes, I think that's exactly what happened. So I think we're going to see traffic patterns adjust depending on how staging works. We know that in Bloomingdale, there'll be different stages occurring as well that will have different impacts. A discussion piece, and it was something that was discussed as part of this, was looking at surrounding roadways that would be the next logical detour. I mean, that is an opportunity potentially to put some focus in on doing some conversion of roads. So if we've got gravel roads that just look like they're going to be used, traffic accidents occur, that sort of thing. Scotch Line is another example of a roadway that gets heavily used if there's backups or whatever. So there are a number of roads in the township that we could start to look at and maybe look at potential conversion of those roads to either a surface treat or an asphalt to sort of limit some of our gravel.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. I can perhaps answer your question, Mayor Shantz. As I drove down Reid Road on my way to council today, it is very heavily traveled right now. I was coming around 4:30, I want to say, and it was quite busy. I did want to ask Mr. Pripe if reduction of the speed on gravel roads would perhaps lengthen their longevity or would reduce the wear and tear on it.
Yeah, and through Mayor Shantz to Councillor Grant, I think that's something we've also discussed. So staff did an exercise of this on some of our dead-ended gravel roads. As everybody's aware, as the Highway Traffic Act dictates a 50-kilometer-an-hour zone in an urban setting where there's no posted sign. It is 80 kilometers in a rural setting where there's no posted sign. That is something that we considered that it would really protect us from liability by reducing that speed. We would not be doing that to reduce service levels. I think it's very important. It doesn't mean by reducing speeds we're going to attend the road less. We think people will travel the speed that they feel comfortable to travel. I think that we've got enough data to suggest that, but in a court of law setting, or if something were to happen, that 60 kilometer per hour does reduce your classification for the road. So it does provide some protection to the ratepayers ultimately in a claim situation.
Okay, Councillor Schwint.
I think as a council, we're all learning about roads, and budgets are going to be fun for the next several years. But what can we do this year? It's my question, because we can do something today, possibly. So my thought is, because of the detour at Reid Woods, we know that road needs more attention, and because the northern side roads are getting gravel soon, we've got graders up driving by Reid Woods fairly regularly. Could we make it the plan this summer to provide more gradings to keep that road in good shape as we figure out a longer term plan.
Councillor Cadeau.
And I suppose to add to that, what are the ramifications as far as your budget goes for grading, et cetera? Because I mean, it's not like it's chump change. This is a good portion of money that we would have to find. So, you know, if we wanted to go ahead with an additional grading this year, where are we going to pull that from?
Should I call on Mr. Petherick?
Is that what your question?
I think at the end of the day, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Cadeau, we've put our best foot forward on what we anticipated to be spending. This would be in addition to, this would be a council directive. We would appreciate that would be contained and charged accordingly in the roads operating budget. And you would just see that line item exceeded going forward. And then we could look to rectify that in 2024. I think it's as simple as that gets.
Okay, Councillor Granite.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz. I would like to see maybe future analysis done on potential roads that we might see increased traffic on, whether it's due to prevalence of road accidents that are detouring or future projects that we know are coming that could be directing, so that we could maybe appropriately plan for 2024, 25, 26, however far out, that might be something we can take into account, so that we're not kind of in the situation where we're having to maybe add additional work on a road.
Okay. Anyone else? So I'm not sure I've got total clear direction from all of council. A couple of people have said they'd like to add one extra grading for this year. And then as part of the budget process, perhaps look at Reid Woods.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, we can certainly look at that, and we can come back to Councillor Grant's comment too, and sort of our gravel road conversion. We were looking predominantly where the horse and buggy community was not. That was the easiest pickings, we'll say, the low hanging fruit piece. So I think now we're in a good spot that we could start to look at some surrounding roadways, and we can present that to council as part of the budget and start including some of those roadways, and that deliberation can occur, and then council can decide if they want to move forward based on cost. Just for staff's clarity, there were two options that were provided. So we were talking about potentially the 2.5 kilometers, the first bend. It was indicated that a grader needs to have an appropriate turnaround location. There was obviously some transition pieces that had to be worked through, and that was about $7,300 as estimated, or there was about a 3.8 kilometer stretch, which is the whole road from Arthur to Northfield, and that would jump to about $8,700. So I just wanted to make sure that council is directing us on one or the other option.
Councillor Bryant.
I think we need to be cognizant of our budget and not start deviating, because this is just one project. How many other ones could start stepping in, and all of a sudden we're finding our budget numbers are going up through the roof? And I think we really have to be careful of what we are doing with our budget and keep it in line as much as possible. I mean, I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm just saying we have to be very cognizant of our funding.
As far as, sorry, through you, Mayor, to council, as far as, you know, option one, option two, I'm somewhat indifferent, and I would kind of put it back on staff. I know that it would be, you need that space to turn around. So that hairpin turn, is it the most ideal way to turn around? Probably not. You probably, you know, as staff would want to do that whole road and do it properly. That would be my guess, and I would probably support that too. I mean, to grade a road and then turn around on a hairpin turn, is there safety concerns with that? I don't know if that's something that we should be considering as well.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Cadeau, with the increased traffic on the road this season, with that bypass or the detour being used as a non-detour route, it would be a safety concern for this season for sure. Because of that amount of traffic that goes through there. Two, it is always harder to grade a road midway through, because you have to do a transition from the cut soil into the existing grade of the road, where if we go from stop sign to stop sign, we have an asphalt apron that we're able to use as a transition point. So it does make the job on the operator a lot easier to be able to start and stop in these locations, as well as the safety. There is good sight lines through there, but People are not very cognizant of a large piece of equipment at times, so it's easier if they can make the turn and stay off the travel portion of the road, allow traffic to get by, and then continue on with their work.
Thank you. And maybe this question can be for Clerk Smith. Do you need a formal motion on this? I'd be happy to make one. Yeah, I'll motion to add the one grading for the 8,700.
Before I ask for a seconder, Mr. Petherick's been waiting patiently to chime in on where we can find money.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to really add to council, one of the things that would be, I guess, factored into the second quarter report, and unfortunately, depending even on how council schedule or revised schedule goes tonight, depending on how that gets to you, but I'm anticipating it'll probably be in September. I think you may recall that through our budget deliberations, in particular talking about our hydro investment and the dividends we were going to be receiving, or expected receiving in 2023, they are coming in greater than what we had budgeted. Now, I think what I said in that budget deliberations is anything in excess we were going to put into the infrastructure reserve fund to be able to use for infrastructure projects. So this may be a good avenue of $8,700 to use for this.
Okay, thank you. Good to know. Is there a seconder for Councillor Cadeau's motion then? Councillor Schwint, any further discussion? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, we have a number of items on the consent agenda. Actually, we have one item on the consent agenda, and that is recommendations from Committee of the Whole. Does anyone want to discuss anything on that list? Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Grant, seconded by Councillor Bryant. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Staff reports and memos. We have Canada Day 2023. Acting Manager of Recreation, Marie Malcolm. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Oh.
This memo was prepared to give council an overview of the Township of Woolwich Canada Day celebration. Historically, the celebration was hosted at Gore Park in Elmira. However, last year, we moved the event to the Woolwich Memorial Center. This change in location added some benefits, including ample parking, adequate washroom facilities, as well as more space for the growing event. This year, Township of Woolwich staff have planned a fun-filled afternoon for all ages on Saturday, July 1st. The Canada Day celebration will consist of free public swim, as well as live music, entertainment, and activities. It will be held outdoors at the Woolwich Memorial Center, indoors if it does rain. The full schedule is released on our website that has the breakdown of the times that every activity will be happening throughout that day. In addition, Canada Day is also an opportunity to continue to learn, build awareness, and celebrate our Indigenous culture. We encourage residents to thoughtfully examine what it means to be Canadian and understand the country's Indigenous roots and the challenges that are still happening today. Educational resources have also been uploaded on our website, and a booth will be in place at the event. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No, hopefully many of you can make it. I'm out of town, unfortunately, on the weekend. Sort of a tradition that we have, but it looks like a really great lineup and some really fun things. So hopefully lots of people will come out and enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Revised council meeting schedule. Deputy Clerk Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening to you and the rest of council. As council requested at the June 20th Committee of the Whole meeting, staff have returned with a proposed revised council meeting schedule for the rest of 2023. Staff have reduced the number of meetings in each month to one rotation, with special council planning meetings temporarily scheduled to fill in any gaps. Staff recommend tonight that council approve the proposed draft as attached to the report, which has reduced the number of meetings as requested by council while ensuring business continuity. And with that, if council has any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Council, questions? No? Can I have a motion to approve the schedule? Councillor Cadeau, seconded by Councillor Bryant. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Official plan review, environmental scan and vision. Manager of Planning, Jeremy Vink and Rob Fiedler.
Good evening, Council. So this is just going back to last fall when we put out the RFP and awarded the program to update our official plan to NPG planning consultants. So they've been working on some background work. This is the main body of the environmental scan, is just putting together the policies and the things that are different projects or different items within the township that have implications to the official plan. And they compiled that together. They have also provided the values, goals, and objectives that they're going to go through and how they achieve those. Part of why we're doing the official plan is we need to bring everything back up to conformity with the new provincial policy statement as it exists today, and maybe change in the slightly near future. But to get us to 2051 instead of 2031, and that's the big requirement. Also, we'll address the ROPA 6 changes in the new official plan. So bringing everything up to date with all our policy frameworks and lining things. So as I mentioned, to the first half of 2024, they've been working a lot of things behind the scenes from council in some respects, but with the public. So we've been doing surveys, we've been doing stakeholder meetings, and just meeting with the public to glean where the public's concerns and thoughts are. And that has set the framework into those values, goals, and objectives that are combined into the plan and to give us a new vision. And the interesting thing that happened, and I guess it didn't really surprise me at the end of the day, is a lot of the values, goals, and objectives and vision that we had in 1986 hasn't changed yet dramatically. So that is something that is interesting to see, but also good to see that there's a lot of continuity, even though our community has probably changed somewhat. One thing I'm just going to highlight, originally when we were going through all of this with the consultant and doing all this background work, we didn't have as much consultation from the Breadner area as we would have liked. It just didn't happen. We weren't getting communication. I'm just going to put a little plug for what happened last week when we had the Breadner open house. We had approximately probably about 200 people come through in the span of a few hours, and we're getting about already having about 70 surveys from the community, just from the public, just since then. So we're seeing a lot of similarities coming back from some of that commenting about what they see as important. And it ties definitely back to a lot of these things we're seeing here in the plan. So we're not inconsistent. We just didn't happen to hear from them, but it is still going to be captured, and it is still consistent with that community's thinking down in that end. So we're great to have that information, and just reinforces what we're seeing in front of us tonight. So without further ado, I'm not going to keep going on because this is more NPG's work. So I'm going to turn over to Heather and Rob to kind of go through everything and outline this. You do have a recommendation in front of you tonight. The environmental scan is just provided for information purposes, but we do need council's endorsement of the new vision and the goals and objectives associated with that, so we can move forward to the next steps.
Okay, thank you, and welcome Heather and Rob, and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good evening, Mayor, members of council, and staff. As Jeremy already mentioned, my name is Heather Sewell and I'm with NPG. I'm joined today by my colleague, Rob Fiedler. And I'm very happy to be here with you today to present findings of the vision engagement that we performed over the last 8 weeks in the community. And I will focus on the vision report, and then Rob will take over and focus more on the environmental scan, which is a background report. Thank you. So as I mentioned, so for today, we'll talk a little bit about the new official plan process to date. So when we started, where we're going, we'll get to at the end there, next steps. We'll do a review of the summary of community vision report, and then a summary of the environmental scan. So we met with you back in March of 2023 when we had the special council meeting. Since then, over the course of the last 8 weeks through April and May, we've met with many people from the community through focus group sessions, stakeholder meetings, and we also conducted an online community survey, which has left us with a vision report. And then during that time, we also completed an environmental scan, which was presented before you approximately 2-3 weeks ago in June of 2023. So we did do the focus group session. Some of you attended. It was done on April 20th. And then we also had some stakeholder meetings where we met with, I would say, approximately 50 or 60 people from the community, from the township. More importantly, we heard from the community through community survey. We had approximately 245 respondents. And the survey was open for approximately 4 weeks. What we were hearing from the community is that people feel that they really love the quiet, small town feel. As you can see from the word cloud there, it shows really what's resonating with people for an ideal community and living here. Some of the highlights of what we heard from the survey are that people would like to see recreational opportunities and facilities. They like walkability and small town feel, preservation of urban green space and natural heritage and agriculture. They see a need for infrastructure investment and supporting local businesses, and then a need for more housing for families and for seniors. Thank you. So ultimately, what we heard from the community, we derived a set of values, and from that set of values, we derived a set of principles. And the principles informed the vision. As Jeremy already mentioned, the vision that was provided in the existing official plan actually resonated quite a bit with the community. So there were some small changes made, but most of what we were hearing relates back to planning for impacts for climate change, which we've already spoken about or heard this evening, 15-minute neighborhoods and active transportation, affordable housing options, rural small town character, agriculture, and continued protection of farmland, and that the township is walkable and connected. So this is, as I already mentioned, the process that we undertook. So we had the community surveys, focus group sessions, stakeholder consultation. We derived a set of community values. From that, we created a vision statement. And from that, we established guiding principles and goals, which will ultimately drive and guide the official plan, the new official plan policies. So the new vision for Woolwich that we've identified is we are a caring, connected, inclusive, and complete community where differences are respected with a primarily distinct rural and small town character. We celebrate our heritage, support agriculture, a thriving economy, and housing for all, while maintaining our natural heritage and planning for the impacts of climate change.
Okay, so I'm going to provide just a brief summary of the environmental scan, which maybe it's easiest to describe as just a background study that covers materials that will inform the new official plan process. And it provides people with a basis to follow along. So what we reviewed were the legislative updates. So going back to 2019, there's quite a few. Just to give you a flavor of them, you can pick up sort of their intent through some of the names. So More Homes, More Choice, More Homes for Everyone Act, More Homes Built Faster Act. There's a few others tossed in about COVID and so on. But essentially a number of acts that have implications for planning. ROPA 6, so the review of the regional official plan, which was approved last year by regional council and approved with modifications by the province in April. a long list of existing municipal documents. So that includes the official plan and a number of what you call background documents. So asset management plans, strategic plans, and so on. Reports that relate to municipal infrastructure that would provide context on your water and wastewater systems, transportation, and active transportation, and then emerging issues. So these are things that came up during the review in a couple of cases. So the decision on ROPA 6, which dramatically changed how much land would be in your urban area, as well as the proposed 2023 PPS. Next slide. So a big component of your new official plan will be addressing planning for growth and updating the plan to reflect the changes in ROPA 6, which effectively implement the growth forecast from the province in the growth plan. So growth to 2051. So you're going to grow not quite by a double, but you're going to go from 28,000-ish to just over 50,000. That's a pretty significant amount of growth for 3 decades, as well as just about the same in employment. ROPA 6 provides considerable high-level direction on how to accommodate that forecast growth, including the implementation of the 15-minute neighborhoods concept. It also identifies employment areas. There were, even before the province modified the decision, a fair bit of growth in employment area. And then lastly, the province's decision to add considerable land. So you are all probably aware, but it was just under 2,000 hectares of additional land. Next slide. So another key element of the scan involved, well, a considerable amount of the direction will be on housing. So the province's intent, which sort of highlighted in the names of the acts, is to increase housing supply and choice. There's also an intent to increase affordability. A lot of that is through increased supply and choice. ROPA 6 implemented a lot of these changes and also supports increased housing choice, by which we mean the addition of different types of housing beyond single-family homes. And Woolwich itself has done a Housing for All report that outlines strategies and recommendations for addressing housing affordability in the township, which is a noted issue. Next slide. The scan also identified the importance of core areas to the distinctiveness of your community. So in particular, the downtown Elmira, the retail strip in St. Jacobs, the stockyards. Also note that you have a very strong economic base. So the importance of agriculture would be obvious, but you also have a fair bit of employment in manufacturing, which makes you quite distinctive. And for our economists, you're overrepresented in primary jobs, sector jobs. It's also evident from the documents that you're very supportive of entrepreneurialism, innovation, economic competitiveness. And the Metro Economics report noted over time, you will see a shift in your growth towards service sector employment from what you currently have. So it isn't that you'll shrink in your other things, but they won't grow as much as service sector employment. Next slide. And then lastly, another important element that we want to highlight is the work you've done on community building and urban design. So there are a number of urban design studies to try to provide direction and control of the outcomes of growth. So what we found is you promote a safe, walkable, accessible built environment with well-designed and high quality public and private realms. Your design guidelines and the materials in your planning consistently will promote the small town feel and wish to preserve heritage features while accommodating growth in the existing areas in your greenfield areas. So you have through ROPA 6, you will have to address intensification and how you're going to grow in those new areas. And so you have a strong basis for that. And then last but not least, there's policy for active transportation to try to reduce reliance on automobiles. So that isn't like automobiles will still be an important element of your mobility, but ways to reduce the number of miles traveled or trips by car. Next slide. Back to you.
So just to wrap up, the next step in the process after this environmental scan and vision report is essentially to prepare 3 background reports, which will focus on intensification, institutional uses, and 15-minute communities through the commercial network. From that, we will derive a policy options report as the following step after that, which will ultimately lead into a draft of the new official plan and mapping. So we'll continue with the background reports and the policy options in the summer and fall of 2023. And then we're also hoping to begin drafting the new official plan in the fall of 2023, which will lead into the winter. So we're available to answer any questions that council may have at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Council, do you have questions? Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to the delegates and I think staff as well. I was just looking at the guiding principles that are used to provide a broad overreaching policy, and specifically guiding principle number 2, which talks about vibrant, inclusive. And mentioned there on point 4 is that will support the social, economic, and cultural well-being of communities, including Mennonite, First Nations, and Métis. I'm really happy to see that, but I was wondering about the lack of mention of people of color as well as 2S LGBTQIA. I think that's important to also have included in those named communities.
Through you, Mayor, Councillor Grant, there is no reason why it was not included, so we can certainly take that into consideration. Thank you so much. I welcome the feedback. It hasn't come up until this point, so thank you very much for bringing it up.
Anyone else? Councillor Schwint.
A question on process. I see the vision statements proposed. Are we approving the vision statement tonight, or is this one step in the process? I guess strike me as it's coming out all at once, and there's a few words in there I think we as council should be discussing before we go ahead with it, but maybe it's the start of the journey and it gets approved in the fall next year. I don't know what you were thinking.
I guess as I read it, if you've got some concerns with the wording, maybe it would be good to hear it now, or would there be another step in the process for that before you get, I think this is going to feed into the final official plan. So you might want to hear where Councillor Schwint's thinking is.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, Councillor Schwint. Today we're seeking endorsement, so it's not approval per se. We're seeking endorsement that this is the general direction and that council is satisfied and able to support this. Once we come up with a draft of the official plan, that's where the actual language will be. But I would welcome any feedback at any time. So yes, absolutely. We can talk about it right now.
Okay, thanks. Looking at most of the words do make sense and resonate with me, but I wonder, are we a complete community or are we complete communities? I see big differentiation between different parts of the township. Do we recognize that? And the other one that I quickly caught was maintaining our natural heritage. Do we want to say natural heritage or do we want to say our environment? Be more clear and specific. I don't know, this is just wordsmithing, but visions are important.
You want to take that back with you? And
through you, Mary. Yes, thank you for the feedback. We'll take that into consideration.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, then the recommendation is that we support the new vision and associated guiding principles and goals to be incorporated into the new official plan. Would someone like to move it? Councillor Cadeau, seconded by Councillor Burgess. All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, thank you very much. We look forward to the next steps.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. South Parkwood Playground request for proposal. Acting Director of Recreation and Community Services, Thomas Vanderhoff.
Thanks, Mayor Shantz, through you to council. So staff have before you an award recommendation for South Parkwood Playground installation. This playground is in the new South Parkwood development, located at 25 Weymouth Street in Elmira. Contract price came in at $118,838 after the HST rebate. Budget for this project was $120,000 in funding for the first phase. So the first phase includes a playground installation as well as multi-use trail from the existing sidewalk at the street to the playground. And then you may recall we had a second phase in the capital forecast as well too for next year. And that is for a multi-use surface, so basketball, pickleball, that sort of thing, and extension of the trail to that amenity as well. Staff received 4 proposal submissions through the RFP. We evaluate these based on our common criteria that we use. More practically, things that we look at are materials of the playgrounds, amount of plastics being used, that sort of thing, warranties, accessibility, and then also just the amount of actual equipment as well too, in comparing the designs. Staff have lots of past experience working with open space, and they're a local provider as well too. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that council may have.
Questions? Or does someone want to move the recommendation? Councillor Schwint, you're moving it?
I would move that.
Seconded by Councillor Grant. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Perfect.
You got off easy tonight.
Yes.
Electric vehicle charging stations in St. Jacobs. And I think that's Mr. Vanderhoff again. I can
Thanks,
turn
Mayor
my
Shantz.
page.
Through you to council, second report on this evening for RCS. So council approved in principle the installation of 2 EV charging stations in the village of St. Jacobs through the budget process. Location at 3 Water Street. So that's the public parking lot in St. Jacobs that the township owns. And council had asked at that time for staff to return with regards to report on whether we were successful with receipt of grant funding, as well as potential revenue from those, and then finally kind of for final approval. You'll note tonight with tonight's report, we're not bringing a formal a selection of a contract or anything like that forward to council, as this project would fall under a lower threshold within our procurement bylaw. So we would go off and complete that work separate without coming back to council. The location of St. Jacobs was selected as it's a tourist destination, so it provides option for visitors and tourists from further away, Toronto, that sort of thing, to visit St. Jacobs. There are currently only 2 EV charging stations in the village, and they are at the 3 Cultural Sister Center. Staff are pleased to report that we were successful with the grant funding. So that's up to $5,000 a charging head for a level 2 charger. So the wording is very difficult. So we're proposing 2 dual EV charging stations. And level 2 charging stations, sorry. So 2 charging stations, 2 ports on each. So a total of 4 kind of charging ports. Staff did consult with surrounding municipalities. The municipalities in the region, the majority have EV charging stations. Prices vary per hour from 75 cents an hour to $2 an hour. And then there's some unique situations as well too, where they increase the rate once vehicles are charged, that sort of thing. So that's something that we would look to do. We have proposed to kind of find the middle ground there at $1.50 per hour. Staff do not anticipate revenues to cover the capital expenses of this project, but we do anticipate the hydro costs as well as the service package costs to be included. So that includes the remote monitoring as well as maintenance as well too. Project will be funded from the Green and Climate Action Reserve Fund, so $45,000 from that fund plus the $20,000 from the grant funding. If we are under the $40,000 mark, the grant funding that we receive would be adjusted based on the max is $5,000 per head. Staff are recommending approval of the project, and then due to the tight timeline as well too, recommending that council authorize staff to sign the agreement. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Cadeau.
probably don't know the answer to this, but I'm gonna ask it anyways. Do we know usage statistics for some of our charging stations that are in the communities now?
Yeah, so the one that we were able to gather some information from was just Wilmot. They have 3 charging stations, one at the arena, one at their town hall, and then another in a park. So no destinations that I think are probably as popular as the village of St. Jacobs. And then I think, if I recall correctly, it was like $1,500 to $2,000 that they're receiving annually in revenue. Keeping in mind too, the first year I think they had them in, it was a little bit less, and then it grew the second year that they were in as well too. And whether that's just more EVs on the road or people are familiar that there's a charger there as well too.
Totally unrelated, but I'm gonna ask it too. When I use electricity at home, depending on what time I'm using it, I'm gonna pay a different rate. Would we adjust our rates based on that, or are we charging the 150 regardless of the time of day?
Through your Shantz to Councillor Cadeau, so it would just be the $1.50 per day. There are some different options for our hydro usage now. I think that we can choose depending on the type of building, whether it's commercial or that sort of thing. So that's something that we could look into, whether you go for a fixed rate versus the adjusted rate. But yeah, $1.50.
Councillor Bryant and then Councillor Burgess.
Thank you. Through you to Thomas. These are type 2 chargers. They do not cover Teslas, do they? My understanding is they will not, that Teslas are a separate charger.
Yeah, through your Shantz to Councillor Brian. That is correct. It would come with the grant actually speaks to the type of chargers that are required. I forget the name off the top of my head, but it would cover most vehicles. And then typically Tesla vehicle owners will have an adapter that they can then just plug into the universal charger to charge their car.
And I do know that there are 3 charging stations out by the stockyards at each of the hotels. The Courtyard has one, Homewood Suites, and so does the Holiday Inn. So we do have extra charging stations around St. Jacobs at this point in time. But what I do find concerning is the revenue. It's so small when we're going to have maintenance costs. From my point of view, I just don't see this as a benefit. I see this as a potential cost to the township going forward, but that's my personal opinion. Anyway, that's my input.
Councillor Burgess.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz. Yeah, I like the idea in the sense for the climate action part of it. I'm just hesitant that I don't want to get into the business of producing electricity like we're not in gas stations. I don't want to get into this per se. Is there you have the ongoing costs around $1,000 to $2,000, but is there a lifespan on this or a time period that you got to get a major upgrade or fix or anything like that would have larger costs associated with it?
Through your Shantz to Councillor Burgess, that's a good question. Depending on the supplier that we choose, they have different service level packages. So we went through this process in collaboration with the region and some of the other local municipalities. I'm going to say 2 years ago, and at that time we opted out of the program because of the cost for the project, and that was one of them was the WMC. And at that time, we did the region went through an RFP process where we evaluated the 2 major suppliers. So costs do differ. I think like I said, $1,000 to $2,000 a year. In terms of replacement, that's a good question. I don't think that there's much to them. So I would anticipate, probably 10 to 15 year lifespan, but yeah, something that could look into as well too, if council would like.
Councillor Schwint.
Question and a comment. I don't look at this as a revenue generator for the township. I look at it as we're promoting new technology, and to get it over the hump where it becomes the norm, we have to be the innovators and kind of push it along. So that's how I can justify the money. I am curious. I don't want to compete with the local businesses. So what is Three Sisters charging? I don't want to undercut them.
It's a good question. I can find out and get back to you very shortly. $2? Yeah. So it does range through your restaurants, Councillor Schwinn, it does range. The charter in Wellesley is $2.50 an hour. That's the highest that I've seen. Wilmot is $1. The cities have a fluctuating range, whether it depends whether it's in a parking garage or on the street and that sort of thing. So $1.50 is a true average based on the feedback that we got from the, I think, 4 or 5 municipalities we reached out to.
Councillor Grant.
I would, through you, Mayor Shantz, concur with Councillor Schwinn. I would like us to maybe look at what's comparable, not necessarily within the city of Waterloo, but within the town of St. Jacobs. And as Councillor Bryant pointed out, there's a couple at the stockyards, at the hotel, and at Three Sisters. I would rather us kind of fall in line so that it's kind of equitable across, so we're not undercutting any businesses.
Okay, Councillor Burgess.
Through you, Mayor Shantz. Yeah, just kind of echoing off that too. I'm getting concerned where the government is competing against the private sector. And if you go on the PlugShare website, which shows a good layout of all the local spots you can charge, there is a bunch around in Elmira, the few Bonnie mentioned in St. Jacobs, and even more that are coming up shortly. And I know a few more private businesses that are actually looking at putting them in too that aren't on here. So they are becoming more popular, and I just don't think it's necessarily our spot to get into that.
Okay. Thomas.
I can provide just a little bit of follow-up. Thanks, Bonnie, for bringing up the, I was, I guess, just referring to the village of St. Jacobs versus the stockyards area. But looking on PlugShare, it looks like some of the ones at the hotels are $5 an hour. And then Three Sisters is $2 an hour as well too, so.
Councillor Schwinn.
I don't see the hotels as our competition, so to speak. When you're visiting St. Jacobs in an electric car and you have to charge up before you go home, you want to be able to park and walk up to the store, not take a horse carriage or Uber, get 2 miles from stockyards to the city core. So I see that as 2 different markets. And that's why I'd use Three Sisters as our benchmark. And I don't see then a whole lot of competition because it's very site specific. People don't want to go chasing for a charger. They want to park and walk away.
David.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to council. I just wanted to provide some perspective in terms of, when Thomas brought this through the senior management process, some of the considerations I think council needs to be aware of is that we certainly understood and appreciated that council didn't support all the suggested locations that we had brought forward, because I think one of them was the admin building and providing it for visitors, staff, that sort of thing. But when we looked at the fact that the village of St. Jacobs is the largest significant tourism destination in the region, when we looked at the fact that there is that big municipally owned parking lot there, we thought it was ideal as a location. And then lastly, we felt at the end of the day, our recommendation is also based on the fact that we appreciate that things are growing in the private sector, but we also know that, many of the people that came to you at budget time are looking for government to be leaders, at least in some way. That doesn't mean to say that we have to grow this on a significant basis, but we believe that we should be part of the solution. And this is a small way in terms of this specific location, this major tourism destination in the region, to say that, Woolwich is demonstrating some level of leadership with respect to, the area of climate change and sustainability.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Director Vanderhoff. If we were to go ahead with this, is there anything in the language of the grant that would prevent us from divesting ourselves of these EV stations in, say, 10 years from now, if it doesn't seem to be working out? Or does the grant say, this is now yours and you'll keep it forever?
Another great question. I would have to look to the grant to have a look. So I can do that while we're discussing as well too. See if I can find that.
And, while you're doing that, the reason I ask is, what has been said really kind of twigged it for me that we do need to be leaders. I agree with that statement. However, in 10 years from now, these stations may not be cutting edge, right? They may be causing more headaches to us as a township than anything. So at that rate, we will have seen the private industry come in and hopefully take over a lot of these and suss out, the market to see where these really are needed and whether or not they maintain or we maintain them there or not. I would like that option, I think, to be able to potentially walk away from something if it's not panning out the way that we would like it to.
Councillor Bryant and Burgess.
Just a quick question. Have we looked at getting a private partner to come in where we would lease them the space to put in those chargers and then it's basically their business to look after? I know a lot of other places are doing that. Tim Hortons, for example, leases out a small section of their parking lot to a private company and they put in the chargers and maintain them and do everything with them, but the customers have the ability to use them.
Through your response to Councillor Bryant. No, that isn't something that we've looked into. It's not a model that I'm familiar with in the region, but yeah, so I guess just for confirmation for myself, the revenues then go to the supplier of the EV charging stations.
Correct. Like Tim Hortons would just lease them the space. The one at Victoria and Lackner actually does that.
Yeah, that's not something that we've explored, no.
Councillor Burgess.
For you, Mayor Shantz, just following that same idea. I don't want to put the weight on other organizations, but would we ever partner with the St. Jacobs BIA in something like this just to see their interest, engage what their ideas on this? Along those lines.
Councillor Schwint.
I can't speak for the BAA. I'm not sure what they're thinking, except that I'm sure they would encourage this and think this is a no-brainer as a trial. That's all I see this as a trial. You see what to do in terms of revenue and usage, and then we know what to charge a company if we're to lease it out. But otherwise, we're just flying blind, and the company doesn't know, we don't know. And as a municipality, I think we've got an obligation to try.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz. I think too, when we rent out our partner with a company, then we lose the ability to not undercut businesses like Three Sisters, that they could charge less and undercut them, or that control is out of our hands, so to speak. I just looking at it, the average lifespan is 10 years. So for Councillor Trudeau, like that might be something that after the 10 years, we're just not looking as a council to replace those units, that it's just something that we feel that there's enough within the village already that it's no longer needed from our part.
Council, someone want to make a recommendation? Councillor Schwint.
I'd move the recommendation, install the 2 charging stations with the caveat that we match the going rate in the village itself.
I would second.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, other business, mayor's report on regional matters. Regional, one of the things that's gotten recent publicity is we're starting to look at our budget, and staff brought a recommendation 10%, and we've had a request, a motion actually to for staff to bring us what a 6% would look like and an 8% would look like, and not to try to read into Councillor Craig's motion, but the way he's described it, I think he's basically saying, and it makes sense, we need to look at what we're giving up to get to 6, 8 versus 10. And so I know in the past we've done that here as well, where we've given some direction to staff as to what we see as a maybe where we'd like to land, and then staff come back and show us what that might look like. The other thing at the region, and I don't have the figure at my fingertips right now, but we're starting not from zero, because through the year we've approved different motions that carry over to the next year. And so for 2024, we're not starting from zero. We're starting somewhere halfway through there, I think. I think too that was it Councillor Schwint that wanted to talk about one of the Councillor Cadell. There we go.
Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate that update. This is something that came to my attention from an article in the Kitchener Record. So thanks for providing a bit of an update on that. I'm wondering, and this can be directed, sorry, Richard, I can't think of your Director Plethoric. There we go. It was the tip of the tongue. Thank you. There you are. You know, given that the region is going to be undertaking this, you know, financial exercise and predicting out, you know, some potential scenarios, I'm wondering, and Mayor, perhaps you know a particular timeline on when this exercise may be targeted for completion. I'm just predicting out in our budget.
We're not meeting again until August.
Okay. Which, I mean, isn't terrible, because we're not having budget deliberations until January. So this could provide staff with enough time to maybe take some of the information that region produces and build on it. I think that the residents of Woolwich would really benefit from a more comprehensive understanding of the tax revenue collection in a scenario where the region of Waterloo potentially raises taxes by 10%. What does that mean for residents of Woolwich? What does that mean for our taxes? You know, even if they're capped at, you know, the same rate that we kept them at this year, with the 10% at region, what are our residents going to be looking at? Because, you know, hearing numbers like 10%, 8%, these are all much higher than inflation right now, and they're somewhat worrying, you know, from residents of Woolwich's perspective, I would say. So again, thank you for providing a bit of an update. And I suppose this question is for you, Director Plethoric. What could Woolwich do with some of these regional predictions? Could we build upon them? Could we offer our own predictions on what a 5% increase would be, 6%, 8%, 2%? I don't know. I'll leave it in your capable hands to really give us those benchmarks.
Mr. Plethoric.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. So I mean, it's not a real complicated thing for us to look at what some of the increases would have an impact on the tax rate. That's just for me, that's just an exercise looking at our existing tax rate and saying, well, if we apply an X percentage to it, it would mean this to the average taxpayer, you know, paying this much. And, you know, we can kind of break it down into however we kind of want to do that. On top of that, we can look at some of the scenarios that the region's looking at, both from that 10, 8, and 6 perspective, and do the same exercise for them and kind of give at least that kind of an impact. I would say over the last couple of years, the school board rate has remained the same. I would anticipate that's probably going to happen in 2024, but we won't know that till later in the year. But I can kind of add that all in when we bring a budget parameters report back to council. I think Mayor Sean's kind of alluded that we do that. We haven't done it in quite a while. So I've heard from this council they would like to do that. I would say, again, given this new revised council schedule, we're probably in the September timeframe to do that. But we still have plenty of time to be able to, you know, to get council's direction on how we would like to have this budget shaped. But I can tell you that I think probably just like the region, it is incredibly challenging. While we see the, I would say the core inflation or inflation rate, I think May was like 3.4%. We are experiencing other inflationary increases that are far beyond that. A good example is our equipment, like especially our heavy equipment. I'm not even sure what the percentage is, but it's well above 3.4%. So that's kind of the context where we're trying to balancing this. And I think part of the context when we bring the budget parameters report back to council is giving you what we would recommend as a tax rate increase, giving some rationale as to why we're seeking that, to at least kind of facilitate some discussions with council. Hopefully that's helpful.
Do you know offhand where we're starting at based on annualized?
Through you, Madam Mayor, no, I don't think I haven't done that exercise yet, but that's something we will be looking at because, yeah, I think as we've already said, there are a number of things that we've started to add into the 2024 budget, or sorry, 2023 budget that is going to have that full annualized impact in the 2024. So that'll be part of the discussion piece on that report.
Councillor Schwinn.
I guess this caught my attention and wondering, Director Patrick, if you can remind us, because you have told us in the past, your kind of schedule for the budget preparation for 2024. I know normally we as council discuss in January, but I'm sure you're starting now. And I guess I was surprised when you said you could wait till September for that parameters report. I thought you'd want that in August.
Yeah, through Madam Mayor. So from a senior staff level, we've already entered into budget discussions, but we typically don't have our first draft of budgets until sometime in September. So, and I would say even getting the council's direction in that September meeting, my past experience, first draft is way higher than anything that you would typically even say that that's what we would present to council. So I think we're still fine having a budget parameters report in September, because those first drafts are going to be, you know, kind of in and around that September period, and they'll always come in way higher than that, because I think one of the things I've said to staff when they're preparing their budgets, if you don't ask for it in the beginning, you'll never get it in after that. So it's always better to put everything in, put everything on the table, and we can start to kind of work our way down and say, okay, guys, what's the priority? This has to go, this has to wait, that type of thing.
I think in an ideal world, we would work together on that, as you said. You know, staff would bring their, maybe not their full wish list, but a reasonable wish list. And then we can look at it and sort of merge that with our priorities and where we feel reasonable bottom line is, I guess. Other questions? No. Thanks, Richard. Okay, any other council reports, updates? No. Seeing none. Outstanding activity list. Nothing on there. We have no notice of motion. We do have a bylaw, and it's changed slightly from what you have in your package. We have added bylaw to further amend zoning bylaw 58-86 of the Township of Woolwich, and that was the Chadwick and Shannon Rieger presentation that we had tonight. So if someone would like to move the following bylaws in the hands of the clerk, be read a first, second, third time and finally passed, and that they be numbered as bylaw number 50-2023 to 52-2023, and that they be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the corporate seal. Councillor Grant and Councillor Cadeau, all those in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of our agenda for this evening. We'll meet again on Tuesday, August 8th, 2023. Would someone like to move adjournment? Councillor Bridges, seconded by Councillor Grant. All those in favor, and that is carried. And in closing, council would like to thank all who participated or tuned into the meeting tonight. Council, please stay connected on Zoom until the live stream has stopped. And good night, everyone. Have a great summer and be safe and enjoy some downtime.